Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, beginning a 2-day state visit to Ethiopia. The visit comes after the invitation of Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. In a rare and highly symbolic gesture, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia personally received the Prime Minister of India at the airport. He escorted him to his hotel and spent time with him on the drive. The Ethiopian leader then took the Indian Prime Minister to an unscheduled visit to the Science Museum and the iconic Friendship Park. During his stay from December 16th to the 17th, the Prime Minister will hold comprehensive talks with the Prime Minister of Ethiopia. The talks are likely to cover the full spectrum of bilateral engagement, from trade, investment and development partnership to defense, digital cooperation, capacity building and people-to-people ties. The Prime Minister of India is also slated to address a joint session of the Ethiopian Parliament, where he is expected to outline India's vision for deeper engagement with Africa. Now, according to the Ministry of External Affairs, the visit is aimed at reaffirming the shared commitment of India and Ethiopia as partners in the Global South.
My friends, what I'm about to show you will shatter everything you thought you knew about the world we live in. Right now, as you sit there listening to my voice, there are nearly 1 billion people on this planet actively practicing witchcraft. That's not a typo. 1 billion human beings are currently engaged in casting spells, performing curses, and invoking demonic powers to manipulate their circumstances and destroy their enemies. This isn't ancient history or folklore. This is happening right now, today, in 2025. While you've been distracted by politics, entertainment, and social media, an invisible army of practicing witches has been quietly taking control of entire nations. They're not hiding in caves or remote villages anymore. They're in government buildings, military headquarters, and corporate boardrooms. The research data is undeniable and terrifying. Global studies conducted between 2008 and 2024 have documented that nearly half the world's population actively believes in and practices supernatural manipulation. But here's what will shock you even more. Some nations have practice rates exceeding 90%. Think about that for a moment. There are countries where virtually every person you meet on the street is an active practitioner of witchcraft. Countries with nuclear weapons. Countries that control global trade routes. Countries where your tax dollars flow as foreign aid. The mainstream media won't tell you this because they've been blinded by the spirit of this age. Your government won't warn you because many officials are consulting these same practitioners. Even some churches won't address this because they've lost the ability to discern spiritual realities. India. India has around 51% actively practicing spells and curses according to research, representing hundreds of millions of active practitioners given the nation's 1.4 billion population. India operates thousands of temples where demons actively receive worship through established practitioner networks. From village shamans to urban gurus, from temple priests to street magicians, millions actively practice supernatural manipulation. The Indian witchcraft system includes some of the world's most sophisticated practitioner networks operating through caste systems, where certain families are hereditary witches with established territories and client bases. Every temple has active practitioners performing rituals, every festival involves active supernatural practices, and every spiritual teacher likely practices some form of magical manipulation according to investigative reports. Indian practitioners actively work through temple networks, guru systems, and spiritual movements spanning the entire nation. These professional practitioners maintain established religious systems that present demon worship as spiritual advancement. Recent studies document that Indian witchcraft operates through hereditary practitioner families, temple networks where priests actively perform supernatural services, and guru systems where teachers actively practice magical manipulation. Between 2001 and 2014, the National Crime Records Bureau showed 2,290 people were killed in circumstances indicating witch-hunting motives. Most victims were women accused by other practitioners of superior abilities. The current Western obsession with Indian spirituality exposes tourists to active supernatural practice disguised as enlightenment. Visitors unknowingly participate in demon worship through temple visits and festival attendance.
Wake up, people. Wake up. Africans are being massacred and the world is ignoring it. Over the last 6 months, the Ethiopian government has waged a genocidal war against civilians in Tigray. So, who is responsible for this? Well, let me tell you. The unelected Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Abiy Ahmed Ali, and the Eritrean President, Isaias Afwerki, together are perpetrators executing a genocidal military operation against civilians in Tigray. Their military troops have committed gross human rights violations. The people of Tigray are suffering.
Academic studies, advocacy organizations, media analyses, and even official statements from governments have all pointed to a single, chilling conclusion. The atrocities committed against the people of Tigray meet the legal criteria for genocide. The documentation is extensive, the patterns are unmistakable, and yet, the international community remains hesitant, unwilling to name the crime, pursue justice, or hold those responsible to account. This is not a story of ignorance. It is a story of deliberate inaction. Arma Media presents this documentary to confront that inaction, to elevate the voices of those who bear witness, and to ask the question the world continues to avoid. What does it take to call genocide by its name? Professor Alex de Waal has long stood out as one of the most incisive and unflinching commentators on the Tigray conflict. A globally recognized authority on international law and mass atrocities, his insights continue to shape both academic and policy discourse. In a wide-ranging interview with Arma Media, he was asked to respond to those who dispute the classification of the atrocities committed against Tigrayans as genocide. His reply was unequivocal, firmly grounded in the Genocide Convention, and delivered with clarity and conviction. Here is what he had to say.
You also asserted that Abiy Ahmed and Isaias Afwerki committed genocide against the Tigrayans. So, what specific evidence can you present to persuade those who argue that atrocities committed against the people of Tigray do not meet the legal or definitional threshold of genocide?
I think the case for genocide is fairly self-evident, and I won't rehearse it in detail. I mean, genocide is defined as, let me read from the Genocide Convention.
Please.
Genocide, whether committed in time of peace or in time of war, is a crime under international law, which state parties undertake to prevent and to punish. And prevent is very important. If there's an indication that it is being committed, there is an obligation to prevent it. And then that's Article 1. Article 2, in the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with an intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial or religious group as such. So Tigrayans count as a national or ethnical group, no question about that. The intent to destroy them was very clearly expressed by the highest leadership in Asmara and in Addis Ababa.
እና ወይ ድሮ በገጠር እንደሚደረገው እንደዚህ ክፉ ደም ወይም ጥቁር ደም እንደዚህ በሚኖርበት ጊዜ ይበጣና ያ እንዲፈስ እና ከአንዳንድ ሰዎች ተበጥቶ ወያኔነት መፍሰስ አለበት። የሆነች ቦታ ላይ ያለች ወደፊት አገር ሲቀየር ነገር ሲመጣ የእሱን የሚያስታውሱት ማስታወሻዎች በሙሉ እንዳይኖሩ ነው።
And then you have 5 types of act. Killing members of the group. They did that. Causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. They did that. C. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. Now, destructive conditions of life refers, among other things, to starvation and the destruction of what is necessary to sustain life, like destroying health and water infrastructure, etc. They did that. D. Imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. They did that. The sexual violence and the explicit aim of those horrific rape and torture crimes was to prevent births. And then the last one is E, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. I don't think that happened, but 4 counts. 4 out of 5 counts. Clearly, it all happened. Genocidal intent is not necessarily to kill everybody. You don't need to kill everybody, or even the majority of a population, in order to achieve that. So that Raphael Lemkin, who was the author of the term genocide, he invented the term, he campaigned for the Genocide Convention. He gave a lecture in 1953 on the Ukrainian famine known as the Holodomor, which was a genocidal famine inflicted on the people of Ukraine by Joseph Stalin. And the way he described genocidal starvation there was, it was to break the spirit of the Ukrainian people. It wasn't to kill them all. It was that starvation as a crime has both its biological impact on the human body, but also starvation is an instrument of humiliation, of dehumanization, of reducing society to a level of trauma and disruption and dehumanization where it no longer functions. That's what is breaking the spirit. And so what we have seen, particularly in the last 2 years, is that the attempt to continue slowly breaking the spirit of Tigray through hunger, through demoralization.
Echoing the legal and moral concerns raised by Professor DeWall, Professor Ketiel Tronvol, an expert in conflict studies and human rights, offered his own assessment of the atrocities committed during the war on Tigray. In response to a question about how he would describe the true nature and magnitude of those 8 months of conflict, Tronvol emphasized that the international community is not lacking in evidence. From UN and EU reports to academic and NGO investigations, the record is extensive. Like DeWall, he underscored that the conduct of the war, marked by indiscriminate violence, destruction of civilian infrastructure, and statements from political and military leaders, amounts to crimes against humanity. And in his view, had the case been brought before a court of law, it should have been prosecuted under the Genocide Convention. Here is how he put it.
If you were to speak to the international community, how would you describe the true nature and magnitude of the atrocities committed against the people of Tigray during those 8 months of the genocidal war?
I think the international community knows very well what happened during those 2 years of war on Tigray from 2020 to 2022. There have been several reports investigative reports, analytical reports, legal reports on the war and atrocities committed on the Tigrayan people, both from the UN system, from the AU system, from EU, from international NGOs and academics. So if the international system wants to know, there are ample evidence and analytical reporting on it. From my point of view, the warfare, as I have commented on earlier, the way it was conducted, the lack of distinction between civilians and combatants, the proportionality of the warfare, the reasoning stated by officials from Eritrea, from Ethiopia, both politicians and military, and the way the widespread conduct of the warfare against civilians and civilian infrastructure in Tigray, it certainly amounts to crimes against humanity on several accounts.
Armed men in uniform leading a group towards a cliff edge. The UN is currently investigating numerous allegations of atrocities committed by all sides during the war.
Overall, I think if it had been a legal process in a court of law, international or national for that matter, I think it should have been under the Genocide Convention.
On May 9, 2021, in a rare and solemn declaration, His Holiness Abune Matthias, the Patriarch of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, broke his silence. Speaking with deep conviction, he stated that genocide was unfolding in the Tigray region of northern Ethiopia. His message, recorded secretly and delivered through international media, sent shockwaves across the world. The Patriarch's voice joined a growing chorus, one backed by rigorous academic studies, forensic investigations, and legal analyses that together build an overwhelming record. Academic and legal reports. From the New Lines Institute's 2024 report to the Yale Law Shell Center study on starvation and siege, and the International Association of Genocide Scholars brief on human-induced famine, each concludes that the pattern of atrocities against Tigrayans satisfies key elements of genocidal conduct. Peer-reviewed articles on massacres, hate speech, and the deliberate targeting of civilians have deepened the academic consensus. This was not random brutality. It was systematic destruction. NGOs and advocacy organizations, groups such as Genocide Watch, Physicians for Human Rights, and the Organization for Justice and Accountability in the Horn of Africa, have issued reports documenting mass rape, forced pregnancy, and starvation as deliberate weapons of war. Their conclusion: these acts may amount to crimes against humanity and, taken together, fulfill the conditions of genocide. UN and governmental reports. The United Nations Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia, the UN Special Advisor on Genocide Prevention, and even European parliamentary resolutions have all pointed to indicators consistent with ethnic cleansing and genocidal intent. Media and investigations. Major media outlets, The Guardian, BBC, The New York Times, Foreign Policy, have published survivor testimonies, satellite analyses, and forensic imagery that trace the same pattern of deliberate annihilation. The U.S. response. Inside the U.S. State Department, officials conducted a detailed review to determine whether Ethiopia's actions in Tigray met the legal definition of genocide. Secretary Antony Blinken publicly acknowledged acts of ethnic cleansing and confirmed that forces on all sides committed war crimes and crimes against humanity. But despite internal drafts and congressional pressure, no formal genocide determination was ever issued. Why? Reports suggest a combination of diplomatic caution, the high legal threshold for proving genocidal intent, and fears of jeopardizing peace talks and humanitarian access. For advocates and survivors, the absence of that word, genocide, remains a wound of silence. The evidence is clear, the testimonies are countless, and the moral question remains, when will the world acknowledge what it already knows? Until it does, the people of Tigray continue to wait for truth, for justice, and for the world to finally call their suffering by its name.